Silent Night is the feel-bad comedy of 2021. Silent Night is the debut feature for writer-director Camille Griffin. It can best be described as a black comedy Christmas film with some speculative fiction elements, starring Keira Knightley, Matthew Goode, Jojo Rabbit's Roman Griffin Davis, Annabelle Wallis, Lily Rose Depp, Chope Derisu, Kirby Howell-Baptiste, Lucy Punch, and Rufus Jones. The film centers on one upper-middle-class English family as they celebrate Christmas Day, except that everyone feels a bit off. Like they're off in that shallow, tight-lipped, wealthy family with a country house kind of way, but also Keira Knightley's character Nell seems much more strained than even someone hosting a Christmas dinner party should be. And Annabelle Wallis literally sends Rufus Jones and Matthew Goode to rob a Tesco Express when Nell reveals to her that she forgot to make sticky toffee pudding. You see, sticky toffee pudding is Annabelle Wallis's daughter, Kitty's favorite Christmas dessert. And it's played like Kitty is the kind of spoiled uber brat that would make Veruca Salt say, like, hey, can you tone it down a bit? And I mean, she is. But it's still odd. Like, the consequences of robbing a corner shop should still outweigh a child's meltdown, right? All of the shops are low on food, and the characters keep making these ominous references to how special this particular Christmas is. And then it's revealed at dinner via clumsy expositional dialogue that it's the apocalypse and everyone is going to die. A toxic storm cloud that causes neurological damage and lethal hemorrhaging of the lungs is passing over the Earth and due to hit the UK sometime the morning after Christmas. The British government has issued exit pills, a form of assisted suicide granted to documented British citizens and residents that assures a relatively painless, dignified death. Simon and Nell's son, Art, is afraid to die and having second thoughts about taking his exit pill. When Lily Rose Depp reveals to him that she's pregnant and not going to take her pill, he decides that he will also refuse his pill and stay with her so she doesn't have to die alone. Yeah, there's like this weird pro-life subtext with Lily Rose Depp's character. Like, she says she knows the poison will kill her, but she doesn't want to be the one to kill her baby. And I think the choice to cast an American was pretty pointed. But she's also framed very sympathetically, and the pro-life messaging is never really, like, unpacked or interrogated by the film. Anyway, Art tells his parents that he's not going to take his pill, and they take him out to their Range Rover to tell him off. Art argues that they're literally rolling over and dying when they should risk a more painful death if it means they might still have a fighting chance. He begs Simon to stay alive with him, and it's an utterly heartbreaking performance from Roman Griffin Davis. Like, it's hard to watch. Child actors are so good nowadays. Like, is it healthy for them to be that good at acting? Feels wrong. Ah! No! Art's parents insist he take his suicide pill and he runs off into the woods where he stumbles upon a car full of dead people, including a baby. As he screams, a tiny toxic cyclone, a precursor to the impending storm, passes by the car and he inhales its poisonous fumes. Simon follows the sounds of Art's screams and finds him with the car. He scoops him up and rushes him back to the house where they both have a bit of a meltdown. Art is taken to bed, and in the few minutes that he's left alone in all the chaos, we see him seize and gasp for air. By the time Nell comes to cradle him in her arms, he appears to be asleep. Now it's time for everybody to die! Lucy Punch's girlfriend, Kirby Howell-Baptiste, got too drunk and won't wake up to take her pill, so Lucy Punch has to kind of like force it down her throat, but then as she lays down to die with her, Kirby wakes up and pukes, so Lucy has to stab her to death. It's like they're doing like a Romeo and Juliet reference. It's a grim parody of the death scene in Romeo and Juliet, which is like kind of a nice touch since Lucy Punch's most well-known role involved a parody of the death scene in Romeo and Juliet. I mean, I'm a refined woman of class and taste, so I've been a fan of Lucy Punch since her turn as Sally Peep in the 2000 miniseries The 10th Kingdom, but most people know her from the Romeo and Juliet scene in Hot Fuzz. Lily Rose Depp decides to take her pill and not suffer after all. Kitty runs off to get a toy she left downstairs and misses her parents' death. It's very sad. Simon, Nell, and Art's surviving siblings have a comedy sequence involving some Coca-Colas. It's very funny. Nell has been cradling Art with his face pressed into her bosom and away from the camera for a suspiciously long time, and then the twins take their pills, and Nell tries to wake Art so that he can take his, and the family discovers with horror that his face is all like caked with blood and he's not breathing. Nell and Simon take their pills and settle into bed with their dead son to die with their other two sons. The storm passes and snow covers the land on an idyllic December morning. The camera pans over the bodies of the dead, lingering on Art, as his eyes flick open and the credits roll. You see, it turns out that he was right all along. The toxic death cloud killed most, but not all. The scientists were wrong, and we're left to hope, for Art's sake, that perhaps somewhere there are others like Art. Skeptics who didn't take the drug that the government was pushing them to take, and who weathered the storm, got sick, and recovered on their own. Oh. Oh no! Okay, so Silent Night isn't supposed to be a film about the COVID-19 vaccine. For one thing, it was written before the pandemic, and principal photography for it took place in February of 2020, before UK stay-at-home orders were instated. It's supposed to be a film about climate catastrophe. Art literally has a little rant about how no one listened to Greta Thunberg, and the exit pill is a metaphor for the too little too late climate policies enacted by countries in the global north. It's building more seawalls around Texas after the 5th consecutive unprecedented hurricane season. It's net zero by 2050, probably, maybe, if Elon doesn't lose interest. It's selling your home and moving inland, Ben. Like, it's not even subtle. There's whole sections of dialogue about how people in Africa and the unhoused and undocumented in Britain don't get an exit pill and will suffer horribly. People under the poverty line and in the global south being the ones who will be first and most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. But Silent Night had the particular misfortune of being a dark comedy about one apocalypse that started production at the advent of another. Some reshoots were done in September of 2020, with the film being completed sometime at the end of last year or beginning of this one, around the time that a COVID-19 vaccine was finally developed and approved for mass distribution. That vaccine was met with a not insignificant amount of resistance, in large part due to the culmination of an erosion of trust in governments that were failing to contain a lethal pandemic, a rise in media promoting right-wing conspiracy theories, and a more than 2 decades old disinformation campaign about the MMR vaccine that was the brainchild of this fucking guy. And suddenly, Camille Griffin's allegory for rejecting cynical, less than the bare minimum climate action is a perfect one-to-one analog for rejecting the COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, Jesus Christ, the toxin even comes in airborne particles that catastrophically impair lung function. If the millennial moms who sell leggings get a hold of this film, we're all fucking doomed. Okay. Hapless interpretations and misaimed fandoms are always a risk with allegorical media. I mean, the most famous allegorical sci-fi dystopia featuring a pill metaphor was intended to speak to enforced heteronormativity and the queer experience, but it's been co-opted by just the absolute worst people that the heteronormatives have to offer. John Carpenter had to come out and explain to neo-Nazis that They Live is about Reaganite 1980s capitalist consumerism and not, in fact, the Jews. And allegorical films that really try to overcorrect for this by like hitting you over the head with the metaphor so that no one can misinterpret the film's message often end up creating an allegory with some unfortunate implications.
Meanwhile, a peace rally organized by pop star Gazelle was marred by protest.
Go back to the forest, predator!
I'm from the savannah!
I tend to like interpretable works with themes and motifs applicable to allegory, but not really like trying to be about something. Think Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Because I read too many cracked articles in the early 2000s and it fundamentally altered my brain chemistry, cursing me to wander the earth insatiable, constantly searching for the weirdest fan theory or read on a text. But, you know, due to their broad applicability, you can guess how that kind of media is even more open to the worst possible interpretations. But whether or not something is allegorical or applicable, whether or not an audience's interpretation of a work is the intended one, whether or not you believe authors should die, I think to some extent we should accept that this is how people consume art, as equal parts Aesop and Rorschach. Camille Griffin's Silent Night is the pro-lifey climate change film about not taking the vaccine now. I'm sorry, Camille, but your debut film is 1 million shy of a Facebook meme. I guess I should say that I like this film, though. Like, I know I just spent the last 10 minutes accusing it of being anti-vaccine propaganda, but I enjoyed myself. Someone on my Discord actually recommended it to me, so I watched it that night, and then I watched it again the next night, and I'll probably watch it again. If not this year, then next Christmas. Keira Knightley and Roman Griffin Davis's performances were excellent, and I genuinely thought some of the comedy was really funny. Not all of it lands. The film kind of wants to have it both ways, with having the characters, aside from Art and Lily Rose Depp, all be these horrible people, but also wanting the audience to sympathize with them, and like, I think it could have accomplished that by making them kind of lovably horrible to one another, but then having them experience genuine fear and grief at their impending deaths. It just, I don't know, it didn't always stick the landing for me. I felt like sometimes the characters were unlikable in kind of like a wishy-washy way. And they try to make Annabelle Wallis like a little casually racist, which was just a little jarring. Like, I get that it's supposed to be mocking rich white people, but like, damn. Also, it's the last night on Earth and nobody has sex in this movie. People talk about sex or wanting to have it, but they don't just like go have consequence-free sex before they die. I mean, like, I know there's kids, but it's a huge manor house and like the kids have all these new toys to occupy them. I feel weird for wanting a sex scene. Like, I feel like most movies have unnecessary sex scenes, and this is the only movie where there is an unnecessary absence of sex scenes. Like, they should be fucking. Lucy Punch also does this like weird voice that's like a cross between Margaret Thatcher and Elizabeth Holmes, and it was a little distracting. Like, I kept wondering if there was some missing context or backstory about the character, or if Lucy Punch just thinks that's what butch lesbians sound like. It was the first time I questioned a Lucy Punch comedic choice. I like the bit where Simon can't open their exit pills because he has to keep running downstairs for Coca-Colas and ice and stuff to appease his spoiled twin sons. It's like if you give a mouse a cookie, but with gallows humor. And honestly, I kind of like almost any film that takes place over one evening in one location. It feels like a play and it really lights up the theater euphoria part of my brain. The film doesn't have a very high rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but I feel like a lot of that is because a bleak comedy about the apocalypse isn't really appealing when you're currently living through one, or any bleak movie, to be honest. Like, maybe this film would have slapped at the end of 2019. People just really aren't into bleak right now. I mean, aside from me, I went numb a long time ago. You can't hurt me now, Camille. Overall, I thought it was an interesting concept for a film, even if the execution was mixed, and I thought that there were some really compelling moments. You know, I hope we'll see more from Camille Griffin. I mean, I'm sure we will. Her son Roman is really famous right now. This is set to be my last video of the year, so just as a final note, I wanted to say what a joy it has been writing and producing and growing this channel. 2019 was a pretty dark year for me, and 2020 was, well, it was 2020, so it didn't get any better. But this year, I've had this. I've had you. I've had all the comments and all the support and all the eyeballs, and I've discovered new friends, and I've been exposed to new ideas, and I've had hope. And I really think that that's what all of these ancient midwinter traditions are about. The world is at its coldest and its darkest, and we dare to feel that thrill of hope and let our weary hearts rejoice. Whatever you celebrate this time of year, I hope it's happy. See you in 2022.